Welcome back. So here's my comments regarding each of the four options to the previous question as to what John and Susan should do. If you recall, the first option was to quickly purchase the house and trust God to provide the financing. Unfortunately, this is what most Christians would do. That is, go ahead and make their own judgment and afterwards pray and ask God to bless their decision. This is dangerous, as it may or may not be God's will for them to purchase the particular house at this particular time. Hence, they could be stepping outside of God's will. Number two, view the financing approval as an open door from the Lord to purchase that particular house. Here's my comments on that option. The availability of financing may be an open door from God to purchase a house, but it could also be a temptation from Satan for them to get into a lot of debt and or step outside of God's will. As outlined below, they really need to discern from God Himself as to what He wants them to do before they make a major financial decision. Number three, study God's Word on finances, including investing and borrowing, to ensure that they are following biblical guidelines. This is an acceptable answer and is certainly something they should do before they make any major financial decision. God will never direct us to do something that is outside of biblical financial principles, in other words, outside of His Word. Unfortunately, many Christians violate God's financial principles simply because they don't know what they are. And the fourth option was to spend lots of time with the Lord in prayer, seeking God's wisdom, reading His Word, and sensing God's specific direction. This is the best decision that John and Susan could make. The reason? Because only God knows the future, Isaiah 46:10, and only God is in control, 1 Chronicles 29:11-13, and so only God knows what is best for John and Susan. That's why it says in 1 Kings 22:5, first seek the counsel of the Lord. The story continues. John and Susan decided to invest considerable time in prayer, studying God's Word on finances. Among other things, they learned that they need to first seek God's counsel and the counsel of a godly financial advisor. They met with an individual from their church who regularly leads a biblical financial study. He commented that they have managed their money well, and he gave them several articles that explain God's Word on investing, borrowing, and discerning God's will. As they studied the articles and related scriptures, they realized that only God knows the direction of the real estate prices, and only God knows what is best for them. Even though the real estate experts were strongly advising them to purchase as soon as possible, as real estate would only increase in value, at least in their opinion, John and Susan decided to prayerfully seek God's direction and to wait until they could discern God's specific will as to what they should do. So here's a question. What do you think of John and Susan's decision to prayerfully seek God's direction and wait until they discerned God's specific will for them? Choose the best of the following suggested answers. 1. John and Susan are being idealistic. God gave us a brain and He wants us to make the best judgment we can. So they should weigh the pros and the cons and make their decision accordingly. Number 2, in light of the recent increase in home prices, John and Susan would be wise to purchase the house ASAP before the prices go up even further. Or number 3, John and Susan are making the right decision, spend quality time with the Lord in prayer, studying God's Word until they discern God's specific will for them. The video will stop, review the suggested answers outlined above, discuss it if you're in a small group, write down your answer, and click on the next video for my comments regarding each suggested answer.